Okay, good evening. We're going to be studying a Sicha on Parshas Emor. This is a Rashi Sicha, a Sicha that analyzes a text of Rashi. So, as we have mentioned many times, Pirush Rashi al Torah harehu miduyik b'tachas bol shenei. The words of Rashi are precise. Not only with regards to the explanations inside the Rashi, even the header that Rashi uses is also precise. In other words, which words he chooses for the header for the Rashi is also precise. So based on that fact, we're going to analyze the following Rashi in our parsha. So, B'tchilas Parshas Hamoedos, in the beginning of the parsha, which describes the festivals, after Hashem says that these are the festivals, these are my festivals. So the pasuk says as follows: 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day, Shabbos Shabbosin, it's a day of rest, Mikra Kodesh. You can't do any work. And then the Torah goes on to describe all of the festivals in specifically. In other words, each individual festival. Now, on that pasuk that we just quoted, which says that 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day is Shabbos. So Rashi chooses the two words Sheshes Yamim, which means 6 days, as the header for his Rashi, and then he explains it to me. If this section over here is talking about the festivals, why is Shabbos brought in at all? And he says, to teach you, whoever desecrates the festivals, it's as if he's desecrated Shabbos. As Hamayadis, and whoever observes the festivals, Shabbos, is considered as if he observed Shabbos. Okay, so at first glance, what Rashi is saying is this section over here is talking about the festivals. Why is Shabbos brought up here at all? And the answer is because they teach you that whoever desecrates the festivals as if you desecrated Shabbos, and whoever observes the festivals, it's as if you observe Shabbos. Now, moving. Now we're going to start with the questions that we have on this. The way Rashi tells us the issue is, in other words, Rashi was bothered by something, and therefore he commented. Rashi's question that he asks is, why is Shabbos mentioned near the festivals? Well, if Shabbos, right? Shabbos. So if Rashi was going to choose a header to ask that question, he should have brought the header of on the seventh day you shall rest. And only those words. Rashi, but what did Rashi bring as the header for the Rashi? He brought the words 6 days. 6 days is about the working. That's not Shabbos. That's the 6 days prior to Shabbos. But the part of the pasuk that actually talks about Shabbos, which is on the seventh day you should rest, he doesn't even bring it or hint to it by saying v'gomer, which usually means etc. In other words, sometimes Rashi will say the beginning of a pasuk and he'll say etc. And by saying etc., he really means to bring as a header the entire pasuk, but instead of writing the whole thing, he wrote etc. But in this case, he didn't even write etc. He just wrote Sheshes Yamim, 6 days, as if the explanation is on the word 6 days. But then he goes on to explain about Shabbos, which he didn't even bring in the header. You following?
Yeah.
Okay, so how might we answer this question on Rashi. Kavanas Rashi ba'atakas sheshes yamim eina lebeis tevis eluk shalatzmon ela kaschala lapasik b'miloy. So you might answer that when Rashi brings the two opening words of the verse, which are sheshes yamim, 6 days, he doesn't really mean just to explain those two words. He's bringing those two words as the first two words of the pasuk, but really he means that this isn't going to be an explanation on the entirety of the pasuk. But instead of quoting the whole pasuk, he just brought the first two words, and really it's for the whole pasuk. You're going to say, why didn't he bring the word etc.? So the Rebbe is going to say there are instances where the Rashi doesn't say etc., and it still refers to the entire pasuk. Like we see in other places. Rashi has chalosh shel pasuk oy inyin va'afilu b'bli lahaysev v'gemer va'pirush nimshach l'chol pasuk l'chol pasuk oy inyin. We see in other instances where Rashi doesn't bring the word etc., and yet it refers to the whole pasuk. Such as, he's going to bring an example. The pasuk which says, and they made the ephod. The ephod was the apron that the Kohen Gadol wore. So Kasav Rashi writes on those words, Im basi lefarish chulu lakach ani kosev maseim kamois shehu. Rashi goes on to say that basically the explanations on the description of the ephod, which is the apron, is not in one place. It's across many different verses. And therefore, Rashi is going to bring an introduction now to explain everything about this apron, even though it's not actually over here in this part of the pasuk. It's over a few psukim, but he's bringing the explanation now, and he says the words "v'asus apron" and they made the ephod, and it's an explanation now on all the coming verses which describe it. And Rashi there doesn't say the gomer, etc. He just brings the words v'asu as ephod, they made the ephod, and that he then goes on to explain. Upirash ubiras kol prati asiyas ephod amurim b'chol ha'parsha yafal pikein, and nevertheless lohetik min ha'kosav kiyim as hatevis v'asu ephod v'bli ha'zavas gomer. And Rashi over there only said the words v'asu as ephod, they made the ephod, without including any etc. or any other word. That's one place where we see that. Rashi also does that similar over here. A few psukim later, it says, the pasuk says, these are the festivals or the set times, right? And then the Torah goes on to describe the festivals. Why does the pasuk repeat this pasuk? We already said earlier that these are the festivals. Why does he bring it again? And he says, and over there, Rashi also is explaining why an entire verse is repeated. And instead of bringing the entire verse as the header, he just brings the beginning words, which is Eila Ma'edei Hashem, without saying the word etc. And it's an explanation on the entirety of the verse. So we see that Rashi doesn't necessarily need to bring the words etc., and yet it could mean the entire pasuk. So we could apply that here too. Even though Rashi says the words sheshes yamim, 6 days, it's really an explanation on the entirety of the pasuk. However, the Rebbe says we cannot give that answer. Why? We can't say that in our case. Shekain Rashi mistapik ba'atakas ascholas hakasev inyin rak b'makom sha'aschola kelalas chalapakas v'mixas as teichen inyin shabay lefarish u'kmei b'dugmas hanam. You can only answer that when the words that Rashi brings, even though they're not the entirety of the idea, but at least they incorporate a part of the idea. So, for example, the example that we gave earlier, which was the asu es ephod, they made the ephod, even though this is an explanation on many details of the ephod, and you're only bringing the one word of the header, this is how they made the ephod. But since at least you said the word ephod, and this is an explanation on the ephod, so at least it makes sense. Yes, you didn't bring the entire pasuk, you didn't even allude to it by saying etc., but at least in your header it has the topic you're going to discuss. But in our case, think about it. The topic being discussed is what? Shabbos. And what's the header? 6 days. 6 days and Shabbos are opposites. In the sense of 6 days has nothing to do with Shabbos. It precedes Shabbos. So why would 6 days be the header to discuss Shabbos? The fact that the word ephod is the header for an entire description of the ephod makes sense, even though it doesn't incorporate every detail. But at least you're saying this is what we're going to be talking about, the ephod. But you're about to go talk about Shabbos and you say 6 days. Imagine if when Rashi wanted to discuss the ephod, the apron, he said there was two words there. They made the ephod, which is the apron. Imagine if Rashi would have brought as the header, they made, without saying the ephod. You'd be like, they made? This is not an explanation on they made. Oh, you're saying they made the ephod. Okay, so now you're bringing the theme. At least that's an explanation. But in our case, where it's 6 days, an explanation on Shabbos, what does that mean? Similarly, in the coming pasuk where he says these are the festivals, at least you mentioned the word festivals, which is what the conversation is going to be about. But in our case, the question that Rashi asks is, what's the connection between Shabbos and the festivals? But the word 6 days, 6 days does not at all tell you about Shabbos. So another question that we can ask is, why does Rashi begin? Rashi, in his explanation, says two things. One who desecrates the holidays is as if he desecrated the Shabbos. One who observes the holidays is as if you observed Shabbos. Don't you think you should start off with the positive one first? Why does he bring the negative side first? Start with the positive one. Whoever observes Shabbos, the holidays, is as if you observed Shabbos. Whoever desecrates the holidays is as if you desecrated the Shabbos. He says, especially that in the pasuk itself, it's talking about observing. It's not talking about desecrating. You might ask, well, Rashi is not actually the author of this quote. He's just quoting the Midrash, the Toras Kohanim. So he's quoting the Toras Kohanim, so he just brings it the way he just quotes it as is. It says, so first of all, the Midrash, when it gives that explanation, it's not on our pasuk. It's just on the parsha in general. So Yedua, it's known, like we've explained many times, we've already said many times that Rashi does not have to quote the Midrash verbatim. He'll quote it in the way which adds to the explanation on our pasuk. So if by changing around the words of his source, it'll help to understand the verse, then he's not married to the language, the specific language of his source. So why over here does he choose the specific order that the Toras Kohanim gave when it doesn't make sense in our pasuk? It would make more sense, since our pasuk is talking about observing the holidays, to talk about observing the holidays and then talk about desecrating the holidays. Clear? Yep. One might answer as follows. Ikar kavanas hakasav b'ashva zu ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos ilahazir shalei nivel lahakil shalei nave lahakil b'asiyas malacha b'Yom Tov b'estamech al kach shakvius u'meili isra malacha b'Yom Tov talei kuloi b'beth. You might say that what's the whole purpose of this pasuk in juxtaposing Shabbos and the holidays? The holidays, who sets the time when the holidays are? The holidays are established by the rabbis, right? The Torah says that it should be on the 15th day of the month. But how do we know when the 15th day of the month is? We know when the 15th day of the month is because we sanctify the new moon, and the court establishes such and such a day as Rosh Chodesh, and then 15 days later is Pesach or Sukkot. So ultimately, the Beis Din, the Jewish court, establishes the holiness of a holiday. So it's going to come the 15th day of the month, and you're going to say, what? I can't work on this day. Why? Because a couple of rabbis said that this is the 15th day of the month. Come on. It's not like desecrating Shabbos. Shabbos is the 7th day of the week. God chose the days of the week. Okay, so I understand the holiness of Shabbos. But the holiness of the holidays, the rabbis established that. So it doesn't have the same holiness. So therefore, the Torah juxtaposes Shabbos to the holidays in order to tell you, no. Don't think that you're allowed to desecrate the holidays. Whoever desecrates the holidays is as if you desecrated Shabbos, right? So one might answer that. Therefore, which one does Rashi bring first in his interpretation? Observing the holidays or desecrating the holidays? He brings desecrating the holidays because that's the whole purpose of the verse. The whole purpose of the pasuk is to tell you, don't think that you can mistreat the holidays because it was established by the rabbis. Avol, he says, what's the problem with this explanation? He says, Avol, he says this explanation is lacking. Says, yes, that's a nice explanation, but when you look in the actual psukim, the pasuk is not talking about desecrating the holidays. The pasuk is talking about observing the holidays. So if the pasuk is talking about observing the holidays, in other words, the verse doesn't say that you shouldn't desecrate the holidays. The pasuk is talking about observing the holidays. So if the pasuk is talking about observing the holidays, then Rashi should have brought his statement about observing the holidays is like observing the Shabbos first. And then if you want to mention about desecrating, mention it. But how does he bring that one first, as if that's the discussion of the pasuk here, when the pasuk doesn't talk about don't desecrate the holidays, it says observe the holidays, right? It says, these are the holidays that one must observe. So what's the explanation? In other words, what's the pasuk trying to say? Hashayla, the question, Rashi's question, which is, why does it mention Shabbos over here? Right? This is not the mitzvah of Shabbos over here. Over here, we're just talking about the holidays. Why does he throw in Shabbos over here? That's Rashi's question. So when you get Shabbos, it's not really a question about Shabbos itself. Why does it mention Shabbos? That's not Rashi's question. Sharei. When the pasuk says these are the festivals these are the Jewish festivals. How do you say festivals in Hebrew? Moadim. What does the word moadim actually translate as? Fixed times. In other words, special times. So the rabbis actually say Shabbos is technically included in the word moadim, holidays, because the word holidays doesn't really mean holidays. The word moadim means special times. Shabbos is also a special time. So when the Torah says these are the holidays of Hashem, Shabbos is technically included in that. And therefore, the fact that it mentions Shabbos over here isn't the question. In other words, when Rashi said, why is Shabbos mentioned over here? He doesn't mean why is Shabbos in the sense of Shabbos. Shabbos, I know why it's mentioned over here. Over here, we're listing all of the days that are special days. So holidays are a special day. Shabbos is a special day. So it's included. So what is the question? The question is different. He's going to say it now. Even if you want to say that Shabbos is not included in Moadim, even still I could say why we brought it. Why? In order to create a distinction between Shabbos and the holidays. What's the distinction? First of all, the distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov is Shabbos is not established by the rabbis, Yom Tov is. Second of all, Shabbos nikras gam Shabbos Shabbosim, right? Shabbos is called Shabbos Shabboson, which is the Shabbos of Shabboses. Why is Shabbos called Shabbos Shabboson? Because Shabbos is different than the holidays. The holidays you're allowed to cook on, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to cook. So then what is the question that Rashi has? When Rashi says, what's Shabbos doing over here? We just said he doesn't mean what's Shabbos as a whole doing here. We know why it mentions Shabbos. Question is, Rashi's question is, why does it bring the introduction of 6 days you shall work? The first time that Shabbos is mentioned in the Torah, I understand why the Torah brings the introduction. The first time, 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day you should rest. Why? Since the Torah is coming to tell you that on the seventh day it's forbidden to do work. Someone's going to hear you now that I work on Shabbos. How am I going to feed my family? Where am I going to get make a living from? So the Torah says that don't worry. Just because you don't work on Shabbos doesn't mean you won't have parnasa, because 6 days you're going to work. So you're going to work for 6 days, and on the seventh day you'll rest. Like this, you don't have to worry about parnasa. So that's why the first time that the Torah mentions Shabbos, it introduces it by saying 6 days you shall work. Another reason is, one of the reasons why I observe Shabbos is because Hashem rested on the seventh day. What did Hashem do prior to the 7 days of resting? He worked for 6 days. So therefore the Torah makes our Shabbos similar to the Shabbos of Hashem. Hashem worked 6 days and then rested. So too we work 6 days and then rested. So the first time around that Shabbos is mentioned, it makes sense to introduce it with 6 days you shall work. Another reason is Rashi also says, famously quotes, that when a person comes to Shabbos, it's not that you work 6 days and on the seventh day you're not allowed to work. But on the seventh day, you should treat it as if all your work is already done. It's not, I'm not working, but I need to be doing work. All my work is done. There's no work to be done. Abul Khan, but if we hear in our parsha where it's not the first time that we're mentioning this, it's not the first time we're mentioning this, we're not mentioning Shabbos. Really, this is not the section to discuss Shabbos. We're just mentioning it because we mentioned the holidays. So then Rashi has a question. Why are we introducing 6 days you shall work with regards to Shabbos when we're talking about the holidays? The only part that the Torah should have said was on the seventh day you shall rest, because you want to differentiate between the holidays and Shabbos. But the whole introduction of 6 days you should work, why is that here? So Rashi says that the reason why he brings the introduction of 6 days you shall work is because, since what he's trying to explain here is that whoever desecrates the holidays as if you desecrated Shabbos, and whoever observes holidays as if you observe Shabbos, in order to explain that, he brings 6 days, the introduction of 6 days you should work. And now he's going to explain how that gives clarity to that. Okay. So the explanation is as follows. When we say 6 days, we don't actually mean 6 individual days. We're talking about 6 days, not as 6 days, as Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We're talking about 6 days as a category. There's a category called 6 days. What's the category of 6 days? When we talk about the 6 days over here, we're not talking about 6 individual days. We're talking about a category of 6 days. And this is what it means when it says 6 days you shall work. Hashem set aside a time of 6 days, which then it's permitted to do work. And that any days that don't fall into the category of 6 days are forbidden in work. In other words, not any day that's not Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is forbidden in work. Any day that's not in the category of the 6 days is forbidden in work. What is an example of a time that's not included in the 6 days besides for Shabbos? Yom Tov. Yom Tov is an example of days that are not included in the 6 days, even though they could technically fall out on one of the 6 days individual. In other words, Yom Tov could fall out on a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. But it doesn't fall out into the category of 6 days. But the Torah is trying to categorize different times of work. There's one azman d'sheshes yamim. There's the time of 6 days, which is hamuter b'mlacha, the time when it's permitted to do work, tasim malacha. And then beis is kol zman acher. Then there's all other times, asur b'mlacha, forbidden times in work. In other words, it's not that there's 6 days and then Shabbos. There's 6 days and then days that are not 6 days, which is any time that it's forbidden to do work. And therefore, you can understand as follows: Shekol hamechalos hamayadais ki'ilu chalos haShabbos v'chol hamakayim kilu kimas haShabbos. Whoever desecrates the Shabbos is as if whoever desecrates the holidays is as if you desecrated Shabbos. And whoever observes the holidays is as if you observe Shabbos. Even though when it comes to punishment, there's actually a difference between desecrating Shabbos and desecrating Yom Tov. There are actual differences in punishment, but that's not what the Torah is trying to describe over here. The Torah is describing over here the difference in categories. That what? There are 6 days, and then there is other days. And Shabbos and Yom Tov are other days. They are non-6 days. 6 days are days permitted in work. And then there's all other days, which are Shabbos and Yom Tov. Those are days that are forbidden in work. So when the Torah brings the introduction of 6 days you shall work, it's bringing it to tell you that there's 2 different kinds of categories of days. There's days which are in the 6 day category, which is time that is permitted to work. And then there's all other days which are forbidden to work, like Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now we'll understand why when Rashi brings the header, what does he say? He only says 6 days. He doesn't mention at all, etc. He doesn't mention any other days. Why is that? Rashi was trying to tell us that the 6 days are a specific category. Rashi is specifically says 6 days without saying etc. and without giving any other words, because it's trying to create the 6 days as a category and saying these are the 6 days, and these 6 days are a category unto themselves. It's not etc. There's no other part of the pasuk that he wants to include in that. Rashi gam tasim malacha hainu mishum shezuhi rishus. And this that Rashi does not include the words you shall work is because the fact that you can work on those days is permissible. The part that Rashi wants to differentiate over here is not that you're allowed to work here. It's that here it's forbidden. And therefore the only words that he wants to bring is Sheshes Yamim. These are the 6 day category where it's permitted in work. In another way, Sheshes Yamim kivan Rashi l'chlolos in Sheshes Yamim al derech vaso seif. V'zeh yovan gam aseder b'Rashi shepazach cholam machalal v'siyim l'cholam makayim. Now you can understand why Rashi begin with the negative side, which is whoever desecrates, and then it brings whoever observes. Nimsa shalimud humanigel chil yamtiv hamachal yamtiv pasiyas melacha shvazeh hareyu over ala geder v'hagbala the sheshes yamim bechlilis hazman aser shmichutz sheshes yamim misuga heter hareyu memela kilu chilos hashabbasos michlalav ad shmehem from the kaimas amedis kilu kim as hashabbasos. What's Rashi saying? Since you're learning out the connection between Shabbos and Yom Tif from the words Sheshes Yamim, which means 6 days, then the connection between Shabbos and Yom Tif in this instance is the fact that you're not allowed to desecrate it. Since you're learning out the connection between Shabbos and Yom Tif from the words Sheshes Yamim, which means 6 days, the 6-day category is when it's permitted to work. So then the connection between Shabbos and Yom Tif is what? That those are days that you are not allowed to work. And therefore, what does Rashi bring first in his interpretation? Whoever desecrates Yom Tif as if you desecrated Shabbos. And then once he says that, he says, oh, and by the way, whoever observes Yom Tif, it's as if you observe Shabbos. But you can't bring that one first because that's not what you're learning out from the word 6 days. From the 6 days, you're learning out the fact that these are days that are forbidden in work.